But here's what Marcus and his colleagues didn't understand about me. I hadn't built Meridian Design Group by backing down from fights. I'd succeeded in architecture, one of the most male-dominated fields in existence, by being smarter, more prepared, and more ruthless than anyone expected a young Asian woman to be. If they wanted to play games, I was ready to show them exactly what they were dealing with. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. in our conference room, the same space where I'd pitched my first design 15 years ago when Meridian was just me, a rented desk and an impossible dream. I arrived at 8:30, carrying a leather portfolio that contained everything I'd need for what was about to happen. Marcus was already there, of course, along with Patricia and David. They'd arranged themselves around the oval table with obvious deliberation, Marcus at the head where I usually sat, the others flanking him like a tribunal. 3 additional chairs had been set up for what I assumed were lawyers or consultants brought in to make the transition seem official and inevitable. "Harper," Marcus said with false warmth as I entered. "Thank you for adjusting your schedule. I know this was short notice." "No problem at all," I replied, taking the single remaining chair they'd left for me, positioned at the foot of the table like a defendant facing judgment. "I'm always available for urgent company business." Patricia smiled that tight smile she'd perfected, the one that never reached her eyes. "We wanted to discuss some exciting developments regarding the Cultural Center project and Meridian's future growth trajectory." I set my portfolio on the table and folded my hands. "I'm listening." David leaned forward, his expression serious, but sympathetic. "Harper, we've been discussing the company's evolution, and we feel it's time to bring in additional leadership expertise to help manage our expansion. The Cultural Center project is just the beginning. We have opportunities for projects in Vancouver, Portland, even international possibilities." "That sounds wonderful," I said. "What kind of additional leadership were you thinking?" Marcus took over, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while delivering unreasonable demands. "We've identified a candidate with extensive experience in large-scale architectural project management, someone who can handle the operational complexities while you focus on the creative aspects you're so passionate about." "A new CEO," I said. "It wasn't a question. A collaborative leadership structure," Patricia corrected smoothly. "You'd maintain your role as creative director, of course, with full autonomy over design decisions. But the business operations would be handled by someone with more traditional corporate experience." The 3 of them watched me carefully, waiting for my reaction. I could see they'd prepared for various scenarios: tears, anger, negotiation. What they clearly hadn't prepared for was calm acceptance. "That's an interesting proposal," I said. "Before we discuss it further, I have some questions about the company's current financial position and the investors' long-term goals." I opened my portfolio and withdrew a thick folder. "I've been doing some research on the firm's direction, and I'd like to understand a few things better." Marcus shifted slightly, the first crack in his confident facade. "What kind of research?" "Well, for instance," I said, pulling out a printed spreadsheet, "I noticed that Whitfield Capital has acquired controlling interests in 17 creative firms over the past 5 years. The pattern is quite consistent. Initial investment, gradual, board control, founder transition within 18 to 24 months. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. David's face had gone pale, while Patricia was staring at the documents in my hands with obvious alarm. "I'm particularly interested in what happened to Caldwell Interactive Design," I continued, referencing another sheet. "Maria Caldwell started that firm much like I started Meridian, brought in Whitfield Capital as investors, went through a similar collaborative transition, and is now—" "Where is Maria now, Marcus?" "Couldn't find any recent information about her career." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Harper, I'm not sure what you're implying, but—" "I'm not implying anything," I interrupted. "I'm stating facts. Maria Caldwell hasn't worked in design since Whitfield took over her company. Neither has Jennifer Wu from Pinnacle Studios or David Harrison from Vertex Architecture. They all went through similar transitions and then disappeared from the industry. I pulled out another document, but that's not even the most interesting part. The really fascinating discovery was this email thread between Patricia and the Holloway Development Group regarding waterfront property acquisitions. Patricia's face went white. Those are private communications. How did I access? Emails sent from company computers using company accounts during business hours? I smiled. As creative director and co-founder, I have administrative access to all company systems. Did you forget that? The silence stretched uncomfortably as the three of them exchanged glances. Finally, Marcus found his voice. Harper, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not trying to push you out. We value your contributions enormously. I'm sure you do, I agreed. My designs are what built this company's reputation. My relationships with sustainable technology vendors are what give us our competitive edge. My vision is what won us the cultural center contract. I stood up, my hand resting on the portfolio. But here's what I don't understand. If you value my contributions so much, why are you trying to remove me from the company I built? David tried to salvage the situation. No one's removing you, Harper. We're offering you the opportunity to focus on what you do best while we handle the business complexities. What I do best, I repeated slowly, is run Meridian Design Group. I've been doing it successfully for 15 years. Our client satisfaction rate is 97%. Our projects consistently come in on time and under budget. We've won more sustainability awards than any other firm in the Pacific Northwest. I walked around the table, my voice growing stronger with each step. So please, explain to me why I need to be managed by people who have never designed a building, never satisfied a client, never even worked in architecture. Marcus stood as well, his patience finally wearing thin. Because, Harper, there's a difference between running a boutique design firm and managing a major architectural corporation. We're trying to help you make that transition. No, I said. You're trying to steal my company. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia's carefully maintained composure cracked completely. That's a serious accusation, Harper. I hope you have evidence to support such a claim. I smiled then, a real smile for the first time in months. As a matter of fact, I do. I opened my portfolio and withdrew a thick legal document. This is a forensic audit of all financial transactions involving Meridian Design Group over the past 3 years. It was conducted by Morrison & Associates, the same firm that audited Enron. Marcus's face had gone ashen. You had no authority to commission an audit without board approval. Actually, I did. Section 12.3 of our incorporation documents gives any founding partner the right to request financial review if they suspect fiduciary irregularities. I placed the audit on the table like a winning poker hand. Would you like me to summarize the findings? Or would you prefer to read about the consulting fees paid to shell companies owned by Whitfield Capital? The equipment leases from Holloway? Properties at above-market rates? The project management fees charged by David's firm for services that were never actually provided? David was on his feet now, his face red with anger. Those are legitimate business expenses. They're embezzlement. I cut him off. Systematic theft from the company I built, disguised as professional services. I pulled out another document. This is my resignation letter as creative director, effective immediately. All three of them started talking at once, but I held up my hand for silence. But here's the interesting thing about resignations, I continued. According to our partnership agreement, if a founding partner resigns due to board malfeasance, they have the right to buy back their full ownership stake at the original investment price. Marcus was shaking his head. That's impossible. The company is worth 50 times what it was when we invested? Yes, it is, thanks to my work. But the buyback clause was your idea, Marcus. You insisted on it to protect your investments if a founder went rogue. I smiled again. Congratulations. It's about to protect mine. I placed one final document on the table. This is a cashier's check for exactly the amount Whitfield Capital, Holloway Development, and Chen Enterprises invested in Meridian Design Group. Paid in full, plus interest. Patricia found her voice first. Harper, you can't possibly have that kind of money available? I liquidated everything, I said simply. My house, my car, my art collection, my retirement accounts, everything I own except this company. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. I had called their bluff in the most spectacular way possible. You can accept this buyout and walk away with your original investment plus a healthy return, I said. Or we can proceed with my alternative. Plan? Which is? Marcus asked, though he sounded like he didn't want to know. I reached into my portfolio one last time and withdrew a flash drive. This contains copies of every email, every financial document, every piece of evidence of your scheme to defraud Meridian Design Group. If you don't accept my buyout offer, these files will be delivered to the SEC, the FBI's white-collar crime division, and every major architectural publication in the country. I set the flash drive on the table next to the check. Your choice. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, Marcus spoke. This is extortion. No, I replied calmly. This is justice. Extortion would be if I demanded something I wasn't entitled to. I'm simply reclaiming what was always mine. David was the first to crack. If we agree to this, what guarantee do we have that you won't release those files anyway? You have my word, I said. And unlike some people in this room, my word actually means something. Marcus looked at Patricia, who looked at David. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Marcus reached for a pen. We'll need our lawyers to review. No lawyers, I interrupted. No delays, no negotiations. Sign the buyout agreement now, or I walk out of here and drive straight to the FBI field office. One by one, they signed their names to the documents that would restore my complete ownership of Meridian Design Group. As Marcus finished the last signature, I picked up the flash drive. Harper, Patricia said desperately, you're making a mistake. You'll never be able to manage this company alone. You need us. I walked to the door, then turned back to face them one last time. I built this company alone. I'll rebuild it alone if I have to. But I'll never again make the mistake of trusting people who see my success as their opportunity. As I left the conference room, I could hear them beginning to argue among themselves, their carefully constructed alliance falling apart now that their scheme had collapsed. I didn't look back. 20 minutes later, I stood in the lobby of my building, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Marcus, Patricia, and David emerged onto the sidewalk. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of the power they'd thought was theirs to wield. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. The Cultural Center Committee wants to schedule a progress meeting. When should I tell them you're available? I typed back. Tomorrow. We have a lot of work to do. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe freely. I had my company back. I had my vision back. And I had a cultural center to design that would prove to the world exactly what Harper Chen and Meridian Design Group were capable of when nobody was standing in our way. The war was over. I had won. And now, the real work could begin. The first sign that my victory wouldn't be as clean as I'd hoped came 3 days later, when I arrived at the office to find yellow police tape across the entrance and 2 uniformed officers standing. Guard. Ma'am, this is a crime scene, Officer Rodriguez said as I approached the glass doors of Meridian Design Group. The building is closed pending investigation. My blood turned to ice. Investigation of what? This is my company. He checked his clipboard. You're Harper Chen? You'll need to speak with Detective Morrison. Someone reported a break-in last night, and there's evidence of significant property damage and theft. As Detective Morrison led me through the office, I'd reclaimed just 72 hours earlier. I felt my stomach sink with each step. The destruction was surgical in its precision. Every computer hard drive had been removed. Filing cabinets stood empty with their locks drilled out, and most damaging of all, my design studio had been completely ransacked. Years of architectural, models, project prototypes, and irreplaceable sketches were gone. Security cameras? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Disabled around 2 a.m., Morrison replied. Professional job. They knew exactly what they were looking for and how to get it without triggering the building's main alarm system. I stood in the wreckage of my design studio, surrounded by the scattered remnants of scale models I'd built by hand for projects dating back a decade. Someone had taken a hammer to my 3D printer and poured coffee over my drafting table. This wasn't theft. It was vandalism designed to send a message. Any idea who might want to target your company? Morrison asked, his pen poised over his notepad. I thought about Marcus, Patricia, and David, but I had no proof they were involved. More importantly, accusing them without evidence would make me look like a disgruntled business partner seeking revenge. I recently bought out some investors who weren't happy about the arrangement, but I can't imagine they'd resort to this. Morrison's radio crackled with an update from the forensics team. Miss Chen, we're going to need you to provide a complete inventory of what's missing. This could take several days to process. Several days I didn't have. The Cultural Center project had a presentation deadline in 6 days, and every piece of work I'd done over the past 8 months was now gone. Without those designs, Meridian would forfeit the contract, lose credibility with the city, and face potential lawsuits for breach of contract. As I walked home through Seattle's Pike Place Market, dodging tourists and breathing in the familiar scent of fresh fish and coffee, my phone rang. The caller ID showed City Planning Rebecca Martinez. Harper, I just heard about the break-in. Are you okay? Rebecca Martinez was the lead architect for Seattle's planning department and had been instrumental in selecting Meridian for the Cultural Center project. More than a professional contact, she'd become a friend over the years, bonding over shared experiences as women navigating male-dominated fields. I'm fine, but the project files are gone. Everything, the designs, the engineering specs, the environmental impact studies. 8 months of work just vanished. A long pause. Harper, I need to tell you something. Marcus Whitfield called me this morning. My steps slowed as tourists flowed around me like water around a stone. What did he say? He expressed concern about Meridian's ability to complete the Cultural Center project on schedule, said there had been some instability in the company, leadership, and suggested the city might want to consider alternative firms. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The break-in wasn't random, and it wasn't just about revenge. It was the opening move in a campaign to destroy my reputation and reclaim the Cultural Center contract. Rebecca, whatever Marcus, told you. Harper, stop. I've worked with you for 3 years. I know your integrity and your capabilities, but I also know the city council is nervous about any delays on this project. The mayor has tied his re-election campaign to breaking ground before the holidays. I found a quiet corner near the flower stalls and leaned against a brick wall. How much time do I have? Officially? The presentation is still scheduled for Monday as planned. Unofficially? If you can't present a complete design package, the council will have to consider other options. 6 days to recreate 8 months of work. It should have been impossible. But as I stood there surrounded by the controlled chaos of Pike Place Market, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The pure, crystalline focus that had built Meridian in the first place. Rebecca, I need a favor. A big one. Name it. I need access to the building site after hours, and I need you to not ask why. She was quiet for a moment. Harper, if you're planning something that could put the city at risk, I'm planning something that will save the project, but I need you to trust me. Another pause. Site security leaves at 6 p.m. The gates will be locked, but the pedestrian entrance by the waterfront has a broken latch that hasn't been fixed yet. Hypothetically. That evening, I stood at the edge of the lot where Seattle's new cultural center would rise, watching the sunset paint Elliott Bay in shades of gold and crimson. The space was larger than I'd remembered, a 5-acre stretch of former industrial land that the city had been trying to redevelop for decades. I pulled out my phone and began walking the perimeter, dictating voice notes as I went. Foundation requirements for waterfront soil conditions, seismic considerations for high-rise construction on landfill, tidal impact studies for basement levels. What Marcus and his co-conspirators didn't understand was that my designs weren't just drawings on paper. They were living blueprints etched into my memory through months of walking this site, feeling the wind patterns, watching how light fell across the space at different times of day. I worked through the night, driven by a combination of fury and desperation that I'd never experienced before. By dawn, I had recreated the basic structural framework from memory and identified the critical elements I'd need to rebuild. The real breakthrough came when I remembered something that had seemed insignificant at the time. I'd been so excited about the project that I'd shared preliminary sketches with my environmental consulting team at every stage of development. Those consultants operated independently of Meridian and maintained their own project files. Dr. Sarah Kim from Pacific Northwest Environmental Solutions was my first call. "Harper, I heard about the break-in. What can I do to help?" "Sarah, you still have the environmental impact assessments we developed together? The soil studies, the water table analysis, the carbon footprint calculations?" "Of course. We keep independent records of all our work. Do you need me to send them over?" Within an hour, my email was flooding with technical documents that represented months of collaborative work. Each consultant I contacted, the structural engineers, the HVAC specialists, the lighting designers, had maintained their own copies of the project elements they'd contributed to. Marcus had stolen my files, but he couldn't steal the relationships I'd built with dozens of specialists who respected my work and wanted to see the project succeed. By Thursday morning, I had assembled a skeleton crew of freelance architects, recent graduates from the University of Washington, and semi-retired professionals who were willing to work around the clock for the chance to be part of something extraordinary. We set up our temporary headquarters in my Capitol Hill apartment, transforming my living room into a design studio with borrowed equipment and rented workstations. The energy was electric. Young architects sketching furiously at my kitchen table while experienced engineers refined calculations on laptops balanced on my couch. "This is insane," said Jamie Shu, a recent UW graduate who'd joined the team, when I'd reached out through the university's architecture alumni network. "We're essentially building an entire architectural firm in 4 days." "We're not building a firm," I replied, reviewing the structural drawings that were taking shape on my dining room table. "We're proving that great architecture comes from passion and collaboration, not corporate infrastructure." The work was grueling. We functioned on coffee, takeout, and the shared understanding that we were attempting something unprecedented. By Friday evening, the basic design was complete, but we still needed to create the presentation materials that would convince the city council. That's when Marcus made his next move. I was reviewing the final environmental impact projections when my phone rang with a call from Jake Morrison, one of the senior architects who'd remained at Meridian after the buyout confrontation. "Harper, I thought you should know. Marcus Whitfield and Patricia Holloway were here today. They had a court order giving them access to review company files as part of an ongoing legal dispute." My hand tightened on the phone. "What kind of legal dispute?" "They're claiming you violated your fiduciary duty as a company officer by conducting unauthorized financial audits and making decisions without proper board approval. They want a judge to invalidate the buyout and restore their board positions, the B." Brilliance of their strategy was maddening. While I was focused on rebuilding the cultural center presentation, they were attacking my legal right to own the company. If they succeeded, everything I'd done in the past week would be meaningless. "Jake, did they take anything?" "They photographed everything in your office. And Harper, They had someone with them from Consolidated Architecture Group. Consolidated was one of the largest architectural firms on the West Coast, known for producing functional but uninspired buildings that maximized profit while minimizing innovation. They were everything Meridian stood against. They're planning to submit their own bid for the cultural center, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. It gets worse. I overheard them talking about how they already have preliminary approval from the city council. Something about ensuring project continuity during Meridian's legal difficulties. I ended the call and stared at my team of dedicated volunteers who were still working feverishly to complete our presentation. These people had given up their weekends, ignored their families, and worked for free because they believed in the vision we were creating. Now I had to tell them it might all be for nothing. "Everyone, stop what you're doing," I said. "We need to talk." I explained the situation as honestly as I could. The legal challenge, the competing bid, the possibility that our presentation might be irrelevant if Marcus succeeded in his court maneuver. "So what do we do?" asked Dr. Martinez, the structural engineer who'd been working on foundation specifications since Tuesday. I looked around the room at the faces of people who'd trusted me enough to risk their reputations on this impossible project. Young architects who could have spent the week networking at industry events. Established professionals who could have been earning their standard consulting fees. Students who'd sacrificed study time for their finals. "We finish what we started," I said, "but we also prepare for war." Saturday morning brought unexpected reinforcements. Rebecca Martinez arrived at my apartment with coffee and news. "The city council met in emergency session last night," she said, settling into my kitchen chair like a general planning a campaign. "Marcus's legal team requested an expedited hearing to review the cultural center contract status." "When?" "Monday morning, 2 hours before your presentation." I felt the walls closing in. "Rebecca, if they invalidate my ownership of Meridian before the presentation, then you won't be presenting as Meridian Design Group," she interrupted. "You'll be presenting as Harper Chen, independent architect, leading a collaborative team of Seattle design professionals." She pulled out a folder. "I spent last night researching the contract specifications. There's nothing that requires the winning firm to be incorporated or to have minimum staff levels. The city cares about one thing: getting the best possible design for our cultural center. But if Marcus has political connections, Marcus has rich friends who make campaign contributions. You have something more powerful. You have the best design." Rebecca stood up and addressed the entire room. "I've seen Consolidated's preliminary sketches. They're proposing a concrete box with glass panels, functional, cheap, and completely forgettable. Is that what you want representing Seattle's commitment to arts and culture?" A chorus of no echoed through my apartment. "Then let's make sure it doesn't happen," Rebecca said. "Harper, show me what you've built." The next 6 hours were the most intense of my professional life. We refined every detail, strengthened every argument, and prepared for every possible objection. The design that emerged was better than what I'd originally created: cleaner, more innovative, more perfectly suited to both the site and the city's needs. By Sunday evening, we had created something extraordinary, a presentation that would demonstrate not just architectural excellence, but the power of collaborative creativity over corporate mediocrity. As my team finally went home to rest before Monday's presentation, I stood alone in my living room surrounded by the evidence of what we'd accomplished. Scale models covered every surface, design drawings papered the walls, and my laptop displayed the 3D renderings that would convince the city council. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Impressive work. Too bad no one will ever see it. M." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "See you Monday. Bring your lawyers. You'll need them." The response came immediately. "We already have." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly. typical Seattle weather that matched my mood as I loaded presentation materials into my car. The legal hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. at the courthouse, followed by the design presentation at 11 a.m. at City Hall. 2 battles, 1 war, and everything I'd worked for hanging in the balance. As I drove through downtown Seattle toward what would either be my vindication or my professional funeral, I reflected on how we'd arrived at this moment. A week ago, I'd thought reclaiming my company would be enough. Now I understood that Marcus and his allies would never stop trying to destroy what I'd built. This wasn't just about one architectural contract or one legal dispute. This was about proving that creativity and integrity could triumph over money and manipulation. It was about showing every young architect, every ambitious entrepreneur, every person who'd ever been underestimated because of their age or gender or background, that you don't have to accept other people's limitations on your dreams. I parked outside the courthouse and gathered my legal documents, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. In 2 hours, I would either emerge victorious or watch everything I'd built crumble under the weight of Marcus's legal assault. But first, I had a fight to win. The courthouse lobby felt like the inside of a marble tomb at 8:30 a.m., all echoing. Footsteps and whispered conversations between lawyers and their clients. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 7, watching Marcus pace the hallway like a caged predator, while his legal team huddled around tablets and manila folders. Patricia Holloway had arrived 20 minutes earlier, her designer heels clicking against the floor with military precision. She'd nodded curtly in my direction before joining Marcus's conference near the elevator bank. David Chen was notably absent, a detail that nagged at me for reasons I couldn't quite articulate. Ms. Chen? A bailiff appeared at my side. Judge Harrison will see you in chambers before the hearing begins. Judge Harrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with graying temples and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent years cutting through legal theatrics to find the truth underneath. Ms. Chen, I've reviewed the preliminary filings in this matter, and I have to say they're unusual. She gestured for me to sit across from her imposing oak desk. Mr. Whitfield's team is alleging that you committed corporate theft and fraudulent conversion of company assets. Those are serious charges. Yes, Your Honor. They're also completely false. I'm sure you believe that. But here's my concern. Mr. Whitfield has retained Crawford, Steinberg, and Associates. They don't take cases they don't think they can win, and they don't work cheap. Someone is very committed to pursuing this matter. Set my briefcase on my lap and pulled out a thick folder. Your Honor, with respect, I'd like you to see something before we proceed with the formal hearing. Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow but accepted the folder. What am I looking at? Financial records showing systematic embezzlement from Meridian Design Group over the past 18 months. Fraudulent consulting fees, inflated vendor contracts, and dummy corporations used to siphon money from the company I built. She flipped through the pages, her expression growing more serious with each document. Where did you obtain these records? They were compiled during a legitimate forensic audit that I commissioned as a founding partner with fiduciary oversight responsibilities. Everything in that folder was generated by Morrison & Associates, the same firm that audited Enron and WorldCom. Judge Harrison closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. Ms. Chen, why are you showing me this privately instead of presenting it during the formal hearing? Because I want to give you context for what's about to happen out there. Mr. Whitfield and his associates aren't here to seek justice. They're here to bury evidence of their own criminal activity under an avalanche of legal procedure. A knock at the door interrupted us. Your Honor, the bailiff called. Both parties are present and ready to proceed. We'll be right there. Judge Harrison handed the folder back to me. Ms. Chen, I appreciate the background, but I'll need to see this evidence presented properly during the hearing. Are you prepared for what Mr. Whitfield's legal team is likely to throw at you? I thought about my single attorney, Elena Rodriguez, whom I'd hired 2 days earlier with the last of my liquid savings. Elena was brilliant and tenacious, but she, was also a solo practitioner going up against one of Seattle's most prestigious corporate law firms. Your Honor, I'm prepared to tell the truth. Sometimes that's enough. The courtroom felt arctic compared to Judge Harrison's chambers. Marcus and Patricia sat behind a mahogany table flanked by 4 attorneys in identical dark suits. Their lead, counsel, James Crawford himself, was a legendary figure in corporate litigation. The kind of lawyer who could make theft sound like good business and fraud seem like creative accounting. Elena Rodriguez looked small by comparison, sitting alone at our table with a single laptop and a stack of legal pads. But I'd learned over the past week that size didn't always correlate with strength. Your Honor, Crawford began, rising with the fluid confidence of a man who'd never lost a case he cared about winning. This matter is straightforward. Ms. Chen violated her fiduciary duties as a corporate officer, conducted unauthorized financial audits, and then used privileged information to extort my clients into selling their legitimate investment interests. He paced in front of the judge's bench, like a prosecutor addressing a jury. Furthermore, Ms. Chen has since embarked on a campaign of harassment and defamation designed to damage my clients' business reputations and professional standing. Crawford gestured toward a wheeled cart stacked with bankers' boxes. The evidence will show that Ms. Chen's actions constitute corporate theft, breach of contract, and potentially criminal fraud. We're asking the court to invalidate the forced buyout agreement and restore our clients to their rightful positions as majority stakeholders in Meridian Design Group. Judge Harrison nodded politely. Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Ms. Rodriguez. Elena stood, and I was struck by how calm she appeared, despite facing a legal team that probably cost more per hour than most people made in a month. Your Honor, my client is guilty of exactly one thing: refusing to let thieves steal the company she built with her own hands. Elena's voice carried a quiet intensity that filled the courtroom. Everything Mr. Crawford just described as corporate theft was actually a business owner protecting her assets from systematic embezzlement. She walked to our table and picked up the forensic audit report. The evidence will show that Whitfield Capital, Holloway Development, and Chen Enterprises engaged in a coordinated scheme to drain money from Meridian Design Group, while simultaneously positioning themselves to force out the founder and assume control of a profitable business. Elena's presentation style was completely different from Crawford's theatrical approach. She spoke directly, simply, letting the facts carry the weight rather than relying on courtroom dramatics. Your Honor, when someone robs a bank, we don't charge the security guard with theft for trying to stop them. Ms. Chen discovered criminal activity and took legal steps to protect her company. That's not extortion, that's responsible business management. Judge Harrison consulted her notes. Mr. Crawford, I'd like to see your evidence of unauthorized audits and financial misconduct. Crawford smiled confidently and gestured to his associate, who wheeled forward one of the banker's boxes. Your Honor, we have extensive documentation of Ms. Chen's pattern of erratic behavior and financial irregularities. For the next hour, Crawford's team presented a carefully constructed narrative that painted me as an unstable entrepreneur who'd become increasingly paranoid and controlling as my company grew beyond my ability to manage it. They had emails taken, out of context, financial records that obscured rather than illuminated, and testimony from former employees who'd been coached to describe me as difficult and unpredictable. It was masterfully done, and I watched Judge Harrison's expression grow, more skeptical as the presentation continued. Crawford was weaving a story that had just enough truth to be believable. I had been secretive about the audit, I had accessed company files without board approval, and I had presented them with an ultimatum rather than attempting negotiation. Ms. Rodriguez, Judge Harrison said when Crawford finished, I'm concerned about the pattern of behavior being described here. Can you address these allegations? Elena stood again, but this time she didn't approach the bench. Instead, she walked to our table and picked up a single sheet of paper. Your Honor, I have one document that addresses every allegation Mr. Crawford has raised. She handed the paper to the bailiff, who delivered it to Judge Harrison. This is a bank routing record showing a wire transfer from Holloway Development to Consolidated Architecture Group in the amount of $500,000, dated 3 days ago. The temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop several degrees. I saw Patricia stiffen in her chair while Marcus leaned forward to whisper urgently to Crawford. Your Honor, Elena continued, this payment was made to Consolidated Architecture Group to prepare a competing bid for the Seattle Cultural Center project, the same project that Meridian Design Group was contractually committed to complete. Judge Harrison studied the document. Mr. Crawford, can you explain this transaction? Crawford's legendary composure flickered for just a moment. Your Honor, my clients have every right to pursue alternative business arrangements if they believe... Alternative arrangements? Elena interrupted. Your Honor, this proves that while Mr. Whitfield was claiming to be a legitimate investor seeking to protect his interests in Meridian Design Group, he was actually financing a competitor to steal Meridian's most important contract. She pulled out another document. This is an email from Patricia Holloway to Consolidated Architecture Group, dated 1 week ago, promising them access to Meridian's proprietary design work and client relationships if they submit a bid for the Cultural Center project. I watched. The color drained from Patricia's face as Elena continued her methodical destruction of their narrative. Your Honor, everything my client discovered about financial irregularities was true. Everything she did to protect her company was legal, and everything Mr. Crawford's clients are asking this court to do would reward criminal behavior while punishing the victim. Elena walked back to our table and sat down. Your Honor, we're not just asking you to dismiss this frivolous lawsuit. We're asking you to refer this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of corporate fraud and theft. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Harrison reviewed the documents Elena had presented, occasionally glancing up at Crawford's table where urgent whispered conversations were taking place. Finally, she spoke. Mr. Crawford, I'm going to give you an opportunity to withdraw this petition and advise your clients to seek resolution through alternative means. Crawford stood slowly, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Your Honor, we would like to request a brief recess to consult with our clients. 5 minutes, Judge Harrison said curtly. As the courtroom emptied for the break, I found myself alone with Elena, who was quietly organizing her papers as if she'd just completed a routine hearing rather than dismantling one of Seattle's most powerful legal teams. How did you get those documents? I asked. Elena smiled for the first time since I'd met her. David Chen contacted me yesterday. Apparently, he's been having second thoughts about his business partner's methods. The pieces clicked together. David's absence from the hearing, his nervous demeanor during our final board meeting, his visible discomfort with Marcus's more aggressive tactics. He'd been documenting everything, waiting for the right moment to protect himself. He's cooperating with the authorities? He's cooperating with us. Whether he cooperates with the authorities will depend on what happens next. When court reconvened, Crawford announced that his clients were withdrawing their petition to focus on more productive business endeavors. Judge Harrison accepted the withdrawal but made it clear that she would be forwarding Elena's evidence to the appropriate investigative agencies. As we walked out of the courthouse, I checked my phone and felt my stomach lurch. It was 10:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the Cultural Center presentation was scheduled to begin. In all the intensity of the legal battle, I'd nearly forgotten about the professional one that still lay ahead. Elena, I have to run. The city council? Go, she said, shaking my hand firmly. You fought enough battles for one morning. Go show them what you can build. The drive from the courthouse to City Hall normally took 20 minutes. I made it in 12, aided by a combination of aggressive driving and the kind of luck that only comes when you're already operating beyond the bounds of what should be possible. I burst through the doors of the city council chambers carrying presentation materials that represented a week of impossible work by an extraordinary team. The room was packed with council members, city planners, journalists, and citizens who had a stake in Seattle's cultural future. And sitting in the front row, looking supremely confident, was the team from Consolidated Architecture Group. "Ms. Chen," Mayor Anderson called from the dais, "we were beginning to think you weren't coming." "Apologies, Your Honor. I was dealing with some legal matters that have now been resolved in my favor." I set up my presentation materials while scanning the room for friendly faces. Rebecca Martinez gave me an encouraging nod from the planning department section. Jamie Hsu and several other members of my volunteer team had arranged themselves throughout the audience, ready to provide support if needed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, activating the projector that would display our design. "1 week ago, everything I'd worked 15 years to build was nearly destroyed by people who saw my success as their opportunity. Today, I'm here to show you what's possible when creativity triumphs over corporate greed." The design that appeared on the screen drew audible gasps from the audience. Instead of the conventional glass and steel box that most firms would have proposed, we'd created something entirely unprecedented. A cultural center that seemed to grow organically from the waterfront landscape. The Seattle Cultural Center will be the first major public building in North America to achieve negative carbon emissions, I explained, walking through the environmental systems that would make the building not just sustainable, but actively beneficial to the environment. The design incorporated living walls that would filter air pollution from the surrounding neighborhood, geothermal systems that would provide heating and cooling while generating excess energy for the electrical grid, and a revolutionary water management system that would turn Seattle's notorious rainfall into an aesthetic feature while reducing flood risk for nearby buildings. But environmental innovation means nothing without human accessibility, I continued, transitioning to the social aspects of the design. This building will serve every member of our community, from children attending their first art class to seniors participating in lifelong learning programs. I showed them flexible performance spaces that could accommodate everything from intimate poetry readings to full orchestral concerts, galleries designed to showcase both established artists and emerging talents, and community workshops where residents could learn everything from pottery to digital media production. The total construction cost will be $180 million, $20 million under the budgeted amount. Construction will create 500 local jobs and will be completed 8 months, ahead of the original timeline. When I finished, the room fell silent. Then Councilwoman Martinez, no relation to Rebecca, raised her hand. "Ms. Chen, this design is remarkable, but given the recent changes in your company structure, can you guarantee that Meridian Design Group has the capacity to deliver a project of this magnitude?" Before I could answer, someone stood up in the audience. It was Dr. Sarah Kim from Pacific Northwest Environmental Solutions. "Councilwoman Martinez, I've worked with Harper Chen on dozens of projects over the past 5 years. Her technical expertise and project management capabilities are unmatched in this region." Another voice joined in, James Morrison from Morrison Structural Engineering. "I stake my professional reputation on Harper's ability to deliver this project on time and under budget." One by one, members of my volunteer team stood up to endorse not just the design, but my capability to execute it. Consultants, contractors, city planners, and fellow architects rose to add their voices to a growing chorus of professional support. Mayor Anderson looked impressed despite himself. "Ms. Chen, you clearly have strong community support, but we also have a presentation from Consolidated Architecture Group. In fairness, we need to hear both proposals before making a decision." The consolidated presentation was exactly what I'd expected: competent, conventional, and completely uninspiring. Their lead architect, Roger Steinberg, proposed a glass box with energy-efficient features and flexible interior spaces, the kind of building that could have been constructed in any city in America without anyone noticing the difference. Our design prioritizes practicality and cost-effectiveness, Steinberg explained, clicking through slides that showed variations on the same basic rectangular structure. We can deliver a functional cultural center for $190 million with a proven construction timeline and minimal environmental risk. When he finished, the contrast couldn't have been starker. My design promised to make Seattle a global leader in sustainable architecture while creating a cultural landmark that would draw visitors from around the world. Consolidated's design promised to meet basic requirements while avoiding any meaningful innovation or risk. Councilman Davies raised his hand. "Mr. Steinberg, your design is certainly practical, but it doesn't seem to offer anything unique or particularly inspiring. Why should Seattle choose conventional over innovative?" Steinberg smiled condescendingly. "Councilman Davies, innovative designs often sound good in presentations, but encounter serious problems during construction. Our approach minimizes risk and guarantees delivery." Before I could respond to the implied criticism, Rebecca Martinez stood up in the planning department section. "Council members, I've worked with both firms on previous projects. Consolidated delivered the Eastside Community Center 2 years behind schedule and 40% over budget. Their proven construction timeline proved to be completely inaccurate." She gestured toward me. "Harper Chen has never delivered a project late or over budget. Ever. In 15 years of practice, her track record is perfect." Mayor Anderson consulted with the other council members before addressing the room. "We're going to take a 15-minute recess to discuss both proposals." As the council filed out for their private deliberation, I felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The months of systematic undermining by Marcus and his allies. The devastating break-in that had destroyed months of work. The legal battle that had nearly ended my career before this presentation even began. But I also felt the support of the community I'd spent 15 years building. The consultants who'd stayed up all night to help me recreate stolen work. The young architects who'd risked their reputations to volunteer for an impossible project. The city planners and fellow professionals who'd stood up to endorse my capabilities when it mattered most. When the council returned, Mayor Anderson's expression was unreadable. After careful consideration, the Seattle City Council has made its decision regarding the Cultural Center project. He paused for what felt like an eternity. The contract is awarded to Harper Chen and Meridian Design Group. The room erupted in applause. I felt tears streaming down my face as Jamie Hsu and the rest of my volunteer team rushed forward to congratulate me. Rebecca Martinez was grinning broadly from the planning section, while Steinberg and the Consolidated team filed out in obvious disappointment. But the real moment of vindication came when I saw Marcus Whitfield standing near the back of the room. He'd apparently come to witness what he'd expected to be my public failure. Instead, he was watching me receive the most important contract of my career while surrounded by people who believed in my vision. Our eyes met across the crowded room. I gave him the slightest nod, acknowledgement that he'd tried his best to destroy me and failed completely. Then I turned away to embrace the future I'd nearly lost and fought so hard to reclaim. 6 months later, I stood on the construction site of the Seattle Cultural Center, watching crews install the first sections of the living wall system that would make the building a symbol of sustainable innovation. The project was ahead of schedule and under budget, just as I'd promised. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Federal investigation results in charges against investment firm executives. The article described indictments for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering against Marcus Whitfield, Patricia Holloway, and 3 others involved in their scheme to systematically acquire and strip creative companies. David Chen had indeed cooperated with authorities and received immunity in exchange for his testimony. Vanessa Hughes had quietly left Seattle and started a new life with her children in Portland, apparently preferring distance from the scandal to proximity to Marcus's money. The real victory, though, wasn't legal or financial. It was standing on this construction site, surrounded by workers building something that would serve Seattle's community for generations to come. It was proving that creativity and integrity could triumph over money and manipulation. It was reclaiming not just my company, but my faith in what was possible when good people refused to accept defeat. As I walked through the construction site, checking progress on systems that would make this building a model for sustainable architecture worldwide, I thought about the missing chair that had started everything. Marcus and his allies had tried to exclude me from my own story, to make me disappear from the company I'd built. Instead, they'd forced me to discover exactly how strong I was when everything I cared about was on the line. The missing chair had shown me where I didn't belong. Building this cultural center was showing me exactly where I did. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, 18 months after the cultural center groundbreaking. I fumbled for my phone in the darkness of my new penthouse apartment, the one I'd purchased with the profits from 3 major contracts that had followed our Seattle success. "Harper, you need to see the news." Rebecca Martinez's voice was tight with excitement. "Turn on Channel 7. I stumbled to my living room and grabbed the remote, my floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the Seattle skyline dotted with construction cranes. The cultural center's distinctive curved silhouette was already visible against the night sky, its living walls glowing softly with integrated LED systems. The breaking news banner read, "Federal jury convicts investment executives in massive fraud scheme." The news anchor's voice filled my apartment. After a 3-week trial, Marcus Whitfield, Patricia Holloway, and 2 associates have been found guilty on multiple counts of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. The scheme allegedly targeted creative companies owned by women and minorities, systematically stripping assets while pushing out founders. My hands trembled as I watched footage of Marcus being led away in handcuffs, his usual confidence replaced by the hollow stare of a man whose carefully constructed world had collapsed. The reporter continued. The investigation was sparked by evidence provided by Harper Chen, the Seattle architect whose company was targeted by the defendants. I turned off the television and stood in the silence of my apartment, watching the city I'd helped reshape through sustainable design. The vindication should have felt sweeter. Instead, I felt only a profound sense of closure, as if a chapter I'd been forced to leave unfinished had finally reached its natural conclusion. My phone buzzed with messages, congratulations from colleagues, interview requests from journalists, and updates from Elena Rodriguez about the civil restitution proceedings. But the message that caught my attention was from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your victory. Some of us always knew you'd prevail. V. Vanessa." After all this time, Marcus's former mistress was reaching out to acknowledge what had happened. I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. Some chapters needed to stay closed. The next morning brought a flood of calls from reporters wanting my reaction to the verdicts. I declined most interviews, but agreed to speak with the Seattle Times architecture critic, someone who'd followed the Cultural Center project from its inception. "Ms. Chen," he said as we sat in the construction trailer overlooking the site, "you've become something of a symbol for entrepreneurs fighting corporate takeovers. How do you feel about that role?" I watched workers installing the final sections of our revolutionary water management system, the one that would turn Seattle's rainfall into an artistic feature while preventing neighborhood flooding. I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to build beautiful, sustainable buildings. But your story has inspired other business owners to fight back against predatory investors. The Harper Chen defense has become a recognized strategy in business schools. I laughed despite myself. The Harper Chen defense? Document everything, build unshakable alliances, and be prepared to risk everything for what you believe in. Harvard Business School is teaching a case study based on your experience. After the interview, I walked through the Cultural Center's nearly completed interior spaces. The main gallery soared 3 stories high, its walls integrated with living plants that would purify the air while creating an ever-changing natural artwork. The performance hall featured acoustics designed to enhance everything from whispered poetry to full orchestral pieces. But my favorite space was the community workshop area, where residents could learn everything from traditional crafts to cutting-edge digital design. It represented everything I'd fought for: accessibility, innovation, and the belief that great architecture should serve everyone, not just the wealthy. Jamie Shu found me there, reviewing the installation plans for the final equipment deliveries. He'd become my lead project manager after proving himself during that impossible week when we'd rebuilt everything from memory. "Harper, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about a new project." I looked up to see a woman in her 50s, approaching, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and her eyes bright with the kind of intelligence that comes from decades of fighting uphill battles. "Ms. Chen, I'm Dr. Maria Santos, president of the Santos Foundation." She extended her hand with a firm grip. "I believe you know someone who used to work for one of our partner organizations, Maria Caldwell?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Maria Caldwell was one of the architects whose companies had been destroyed by Marcus's scheme, one of the women who'd vanished from the industry after losing everything she'd built. "I've heard of her work," I said carefully. "What happened to her was a tragedy." Dr. Santos smiled grimly. "Maria didn't vanish, Ms. Chen. She's been working with us, documenting patterns of predatory investment targeting women and minority business owners. Your victory against Whitfield wasn't just personal, it was the breakthrough we needed to build a federal case." She pulled out a tablet and showed me a presentation slide. "The Santos Foundation wants to fund a new initiative. We're calling it the Resilience Project, a combination legal defense fund, business incubator, and mentorship network designed to help creative entrepreneurs fight back against predatory investors." I studied the proposal, feeling my excitement grow with each page. "You want to institutionalize what happened to me. We want to make sure it never has to happen again, or when it does, that the entrepreneurs have the resources and support they need to fight back effectively." The scope was breathtaking. Legal clinics staffed by attorneys like Elena Rodriguez, business accelerators focused on sustainable growth rather than quick profits, mentorship programs pairing established entrepreneurs with newcomers navigating their first major challenges. "Dr. Santos, this is incredible, but why are you approaching me?" "Because you proved it could be done. More importantly, you proved it could be done without compromising your values or your vision. We want you to head the architectural division of the Resilience Project." I set down the tablet and walked to the window overlooking the cultural center site. "I'm flattered, but I'm not sure I'm the right person to lead something like this. I barely survived my own experience." "Ms. Chen, you didn't barely survive. You thrived. You turned an attempt to destroy you into the catalyst for building something even better." Dr. Santos joined me at the window. "Maria Caldwell told me to tell you something. She said that watching your victory gave her hope that the work we're doing matters." That evening, I found myself back at Pike Place Market, walking the same route. I'd taken the day I discovered Marcus's scheme. The familiar chaos of tourists, vendors, and street performers created a comforting backdrop as I processed Dr. Santos's offer. My phone rang with a call from an unknown international number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Harper Chen? This is Chen Wei from Beijing. I represent a consortium of Chinese architectural firms interested in sustainable design partnerships." I stopped walking, suddenly aware that my reputation had spread far beyond Seattle. "What kind of partnerships?" "We've been following your work on the Cultural Center project. We have several clients interested in commissioning similar buildings in major Chinese cities. The environmental benefits could be extraordinary if we could scale your innovations." The conversation lasted an hour, covering everything from technical specifications to cultural adaptation requirements. By the time it ended, I had tentative agreements for consultations on 4 major projects that could revolutionize sustainable architecture across Asia. As I walked home through Seattle's downtown core, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For 15 years, I'd been building a business. Now I was building a movement. The next month brought a parade of opportunities that would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier. The European Union invited me to consult on their carbon-neutral building initiative. 3 major universities offered visiting professorships. Netflix approached me about developing a documentary series on sustainable architecture, but the opportunity that excited me most was smaller and more personal. Rebecca Martinez called with news that Seattle was planning a second cultural center in the South End, specifically designed to serve the city's growing immigrant communities. "The council wants you to design it," she said. "But Harper, they want to do something unprecedented. They want the building to be designed collaboratively with the communities it will serve." "Participatory architecture," I murmured, thinking about the implications. "Instead of designing for people, we'd be designing with them." Exactly. It would be the first major public building in America designed entirely through community input. "Are you interested?" I thought about the workshops I'd envisioned for the original cultural center, the spaces where people could learn and create and discover their own artistic capabilities. What if we applied that same collaborative spirit to the design process itself? "Rebecca, I'm more than interested. I'm inspired." The South End Cultural Center project became the foundation for everything that followed. We spent 6 months holding community meetings in church basements, school cafeterias, and neighborhood centers, listening to residents describe their dreams for the building that would serve their families. The design that emerged was unlike anything I'd created before. Instead of a single grand structure, we conceived a campus of interconnected buildings that reflected the diverse cultural traditions of the neighborhood's residents. A community kitchen designed by recent immigrants who wanted to share their culinary traditions. Performance spaces that could accommodate everything from traditional Somali poetry to Vietnamese folk music. Art studios where children could learn techniques from master craftspeople representing a dozen different cultures. The project attracted international attention, drawing visitors from around the world who wanted to study this new model of community-centered architecture. More importantly, it became a template that other cities began adopting, proving that great design could emerge from genuine collaboration rather than top-down expertise. As construction began on the South End project, I made my decision about Dr. Santos's offer. I would join the Resilience Project, but on my own terms. Instead of leaving architecture to become a full-time advocate, I would demonstrate that business success and social responsibility weren't mutually exclusive. Meridian Design Group evolved into something unprecedented, a for-profit architectural firm that functioned like a social enterprise. We took on high-paying commercial projects that funded pro bono work for communities that couldn't afford traditional architectural services. We mentored young entrepreneurs through the Resilience Project while building a portfolio of internationally recognized sustainable buildings. Most importantly, we proved that companies founded on principles of collaboration and integrity could compete successfully against traditional corporate models. The full circle moment came 3 years after that. Initial confrontation in the boardroom, when I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. Harvard Business School wanted me to deliver the keynote address at their annual entrepreneurship conference, speaking about building resilient creative businesses in a predatory investment environment. Standing at the podium in Harvard's prestigious Burden Hall, looking out at an audience of ambitious MBA students and established business leaders, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 3 years ago, I began, I sat in a restaurant in Rome watching my marriage crumble because I'd discovered my husband's affair. But this isn't a story about infidelity or divorce. It's a story about what happens when you realize that the people you trusted to support your dreams were actually planning to steal them. I told them about Marcus and his systematic scheme to acquire creative companies, about the missing chair that had revealed my family's true feelings about my place in their world, about the week when everything I'd built seemed lost and the choice between giving up or fighting back. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about business strategy or legal maneuvering, I continued. It was about the difference between being included and belonging. For years, I'd accepted inclusion in spaces where I was tolerated but never truly welcomed. Fighting for my company taught me to demand belonging, to insist on spaces where my contributions were valued, my expertise respected, and my vision supported. After the speech, a young woman approached me during the reception. She was maybe 25, with the intense focus of someone who'd already survived more challenges than most people face in a lifetime. Ms. Chen, I'm Sarah Okafor. I started a tech company in Lagos that's being targeted by investors using the same tactics you described. After hearing your story, I realize I have more options than I thought. We talked for an hour about documentation, strategies, alliance building, and the importance of having an exit plan that preserved both dignity and assets. By the end of our conversation, Sarah had connected with Elena Rodriguez for legal consultation and Dr. Santos for resilience project support. 6 months later, Sarah successfully fought off the predatory investors and expanded her company internationally, becoming Nigeria's youngest female tech CEO. She sent me a photo of herself ringing the opening bell at the Lagos Stock Exchange, with a note that read, "Thank you for showing me that fighting back was possible." That's when I finally understood the true impact of what had happened in that boardroom 3 years earlier. The missing chair hadn't just revealed my family's betrayal, it had forced me to discover my own strength. And that discovery had created ripple effects far beyond anything I could have imagined. Today, as I write this from my office overlooking the completed Seattle Cultural Center, I can see families from dozens of different communities enjoying the spaces we created together. Children attend art classes in studios designed specifically for their small hands. Teenagers collaborate on digital media projects in makerspaces equipped with cutting-edge technology. Adults learn new skills in workshops that bridge traditional crafts with modern innovation. The building itself has become a living demonstration of what's possible when sustainability, beauty, and community accessibility work together. The living walls have cleaned thousands of tons of carbon from Seattle's air. The water management system has prevented 3 major floods in surrounding neighborhoods. The energy generation systems produce 15% more power than the building consumes, feeding clean electricity back into the city grid. But the real success isn't measured in environmental impact or architectural awards. It's measured in the stories of people who discovered their own creative capabilities within these walls. The immigrant grandmother who learned digital photography and now documents her community's history. The teenage poet whose work premiered in our performance hall and earned her a full scholarship to the University of Washington. The former gang member who found healing through sculpture and now teaches art therapy to at-risk youth. The Resilience Project has grown beyond our most ambitious projections. We've helped over 200 entrepreneurs successfully defend their companies against predatory investors. We've mentored another 500 through sustainable growth strategies that prioritize long-term value over short-term profits. Most importantly, we've proven that building ethical businesses isn't just morally superior, it's more profitable and sustainable than the extractive models that destroyed so many careers. Marcus Whitfield is serving a 12-year federal sentence for corporate fraud. Patricia Holloway forfeited most of her family's real estate holdings to pay restitution to the companies they'd damaged. David Chen cooperated fully with authorities and now works for the SEC, helping investigate similar schemes targeting minority-owned businesses. But this story isn't really about their downfall. It's about what becomes possible when you refuse to accept other people's limitations on your potential. Last week, I received an email that brought tears to my eyes. It was from Maria Caldwell, the architect whose disappearance had first revealed the scope of Marcus's scheme. "Harper," she wrote, "I wanted you to know that I'm designing again. The Resilience Project helped me restart my practice, and I just won the contract for San Francisco's new affordable housing initiative. It's the first time in 4 years that I've been excited about architecture instead of just surviving it. Thank you for fighting back when I couldn't." As I finish writing this story, construction crews are breaking ground on our 3rd collaborative cultural center, this one in Portland's historically Black Albina district. The design process took 18 months of community meetings, but the result is a building that truly reflects the dreams and needs of the people it will serve. The missing chair that started this journey had been intended as my exclusion from a family that never valued my contributions. Instead, it became my invitation to build something bigger, a community of creative professionals who support each other's success rather than competing for scraps from corporate tables. I learned that belonging isn't something you can negotiate or earn through compliance. It's something you create by building spaces where your authentic self can thrive. The chair was never missing. I just needed to build my own table. And now, 3 years later, that table is big enough for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. Everyone who's ever had their dreams dismissed. Everyone who's ever been underestimated because of their gender, race, age, or background. There's always room for one more chair. The war that began with systematic exclusion ended with systematic inclusion. Marcus and his allies tried to erase me from my own story. Instead, they forced me to write a better ending than I ever could have imagined. Sometimes the greatest gift your enemies can give you is underestimating your strength. I've spent the last 3 years proving them wrong, one building at a time, one mentored entrepreneur at a time, one community collaboration at a time. The missing chair taught me where I didn't belong. Building the table taught me exactly where I did. The end up next. You've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.